Today on Locked On Red Wings, who is a part of Detroit's core?
You're Locked On Red Wings, your daily podcast on the Detroit Red Wings. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome back to the Locked On Red Wings podcast. We are your hosts, Brian Fisher and Scotty Bentley. Scotty's a host over at Locked On Tigers, as well as a sports writer for CNG newspapers, while I am a color commentator for Oakland University ACHA D1 men's hockey. And you know what? Give you guys a break from free agent profiles, draft profiles, and trade scenarios. Let's talk about the Red Wings themselves, who's already here and who's part of this team's core, because we've done a lot of trade episodes recently, and it keeps coming up, like who are the players that are untouchable and who are the players that, we would trade if the package was perfect, but it would be tough to want to trade. So I figure we could reset that conversation from last year, because I know we did this conversation last year with another year of growth under the youth, and talk about who we think is part of the core that is untouchable, part of the core that you don't want to move, but you would in the right circumstances. You wouldn't like to. And then who is just like not part of the core, who is earning their way in there. And it's just like the core, in air quotes, right? In air quotes, the core is a very nuanced conversation in its own right. So we'll have fun and talk about that today. Scotty, and let's just start there, man. First of all, happy Monday. I hope you had a good weekend, buddy.
Yeah, you too. We're recording this before the Cubs-Tigers rubber match, and I think that will determine how my weekend went. Probably much more than my therapist would like. So I will we'll see how it ends up. But yes, it's been a nice weekend for sure. It's
always so funny when we say things like "Hope you had a good weekend," and it's still before noon on a Sunday when we record it. But just for the listeners, the weekend's over. But yeah, let's start the conversation with what I think is the easy one, right? We're talking about the core, right? We're talking about the players on this team who are supposed to be the nucleus, the players on this team who are presumably supposed to lead us to the playoffs and to the Stanley Cup at some point in our lifetimes, in their careers. I think you lead off here with the two young guys on your team who are locked up long-term and who are by far and away the leaders on your team in both defense and wingers, on forwards rather, and Lucas Raymond and Moritz Seider. These are Steve Yzerman's first draft picks, 2019, sixth overall, and 2020, fourth overall. Lucas Raymond, 80 points last season, the first Detroit Red Wing to have 80 points since, what did I say, Zetterberg in 2011 or something ridiculous like that. Moritz Seider, 2022 Calder Trophy winner, I think it was. Incredible player. Number one defenseman, plays PP1, PK1, faces the toughest deployments in the league. Those two guys aren't just part of the core. In my eyes, they are untouchable. They are guys that you're not trading unless Connor McDavid becomes available, right? There's always that straw man argument, but in 99% of scenarios, you're not trading this player.
Yeah, I think if you were to try and narrow down or pick, because like you mentioned, it's kind of like an onion, right? There's a lot of layers to you can talk about you can talk about the core, right? The very center, who is the entire organization kind of being built around, and then you can kind of slowly zoom out and be okay, this player we want for a long time, he's here, but if there was something, or an opportunity to upgrade, that wouldn't be the worst thing in the world type of thing. And I think at the very core of the core, you talk about,
people are going to be so sick of hearing us say that word by the end of this episode.
The very center of this conversation, I don't think there are two players that kind of personify what this conversation is about more than Seider and Raymond. I think that those two at a base level, probably more than anybody else in the entire organization, are the two guys that you are planning on and hoping will be a pillar on the ice for you for the next, decade plus in a perfect world, and are going to be in their primes and are going to be, the best players on the team or some of the best players on the team when you raise Lord Stanley above your head. That is, I think the probably again at the very base level, the two guys that kind of define this more than anybody else in the organization.
Yeah, I mean, these are guys that you're building around. These are that's why they were picked. They were Steve Yzerman's first draft picks. You're building around they've proven that they can be pillars of the organization. There was a player that I didn't name there that I think a lot of fans may be surprised I didn't name, and that was Dylan Larkin. And I think there's an interesting conversation to be had about Dylan Larkin. I think last year he was in our untouchable pieces, right? And I think he just finished, the second year of his 8-year deal. And I don't know where I stand with Larkin. And, don't get me wrong, he's part of the core. You're building around Dylan Larkin. You've been building around Dylan Larkin since he was drafted in 2015. But would I say he is an absolutely untouchable player? That's where I'm starting to wonder. This is a really, really good center. He is a true 1C in the NHL, but even amongst 1Cs, there are different tiers. Is he a 1C that I can see leading this team to a Stanley Cup? I do start to wonder. He has had a couple of seasons, I think 3 seasons before this one, where he floated around a point per game. 69 points in 71 games, 79 points in 80 games, 69 points in 68. That was his first season over a point per game. Obviously, he missed games last season, I guess 2 seasons ago technically now, due to injuries and other personal matters and whatnot, but still finished over a point per game. And he has had 4 consecutive 30-goal seasons. That's all fantastic. But he's never reached the 80-point plateau. And when you're looking at 1Cs, you do need a guy who can take you to that next level. And obviously there's more than that. The point production, he's grown his game. He's become a penalty kill guy too. I don't know. I'm at a point now where I wouldn't trade Larkin unless a really good offer comes aboard. I wouldn't trade Larkin unless I know I'm getting better at that position, because it's really hard to get better at that position. But I wouldn't say, to me, he is untouchable anymore.
Yeah, I think I agree with you. I again, if you're tiering this list, if you're having layers when it comes to the conversation around who are the wings building around, I think he is probably a half a step below Raymond and Seider.
Half step is a good way to put it. Half step below.
Right, he's just barely a notch below those two, but he's still above literally everybody else in the organization.
Correct.
It's not as though they are actively trying to move him. It's not as though the organization is not being built around the I don't know, premise of him being the 1C going forward. That is all still very true. I just think that there is very, very few offers that could come across the Red Wings desk to truly entertain moving Raymond or Seider, whereas with Larkin, it is similar. I mean, there are very few offers that would make them consider moving him. However, I think that it's at least, again, maybe a fraction of a percent more plausible. So I agree with you. This is not to say that, again, that they're still building around him. He's the captain. They still want him long term. They still want him to be, a prominent part of this team and in his prime years when they win the cup as well. They are still building around him. But I do think there's something to be said for, if you're strictly comparing his role going forward to Raymond and Seider's, I think there is a difference there. It's just a very small one, and he's still better, and more of a piece of the core than everybody else on the roster.
Right. Scotty, let's head to a quick break. When we return, we'll continue this conversation, talk about a couple of young guys who may have worked their way officially into being core status. So stay tuned to segment 2 of Locked On Red Wings. Ever check your bank account and wonder, where did all my money go? Between dining out, online shopping, and entertainment, it's easy to lose track. That's where Monarch Money comes in, your personal CFO, giving you full visibility and control over your finances. Monarch Money isn't just a budgeting app, it's a complete financial command center. You can track all your bank accounts, investments, and spending in one place, so you stop just managing your money and start building your wealth. When you start using Monarch, you're going to realize how much you were spending on food delivery, subscriptions, and more. Now you can budget smarter and save more. Instead of juggling multiple apps, you can use Monarch to check your finances, track spending, and even plan long-term goals. Managing money with your partner is smoother than ever. You can track shared and personal accounts, set goals, and stay on the same page without the stress. Take control of your finances with Monarch Money. Use code LOCKEDONNHL at monarchmoney.com for 50% off your first year. That's monarchmoney.com, code LOCKEDONNHL for half off your first year. Segment 2, Locked On Red Wings podcast. All right, Scotty, I want to talk about a couple more players here that I feel have probably worked their way, honestly, into like Dylan Larkin core status. Guys that you would have to have a perfect trade for to be willing to move on from. And like, I'm talking like, Jason Robertson, for example, the other day, where it's like, oh, you're really testing the waters here on what I'd be willing to take. Like, these are guys they're going to be asking for. I think Simon Edvinsson and Marco Kasper, guys who last year we spoke about, were like, I think with Edvinsson specifically, because he finished the year with the team, we were like, these guys are like right on the precipice. Like, they're going to be core pieces, but we just have to see another like year of development out of them. And now we saw another year out of development. Edvinsson stepped in and was a top 4 role, at times on the top pair. He should be on the top pair, but we just lack the depth to put them on the same pair right now. And with Marco Kasper, like, this is a guy who was playing on the third line with the Red Wings 2 weeks into the season, worked his way up to the top line as a winger, and then just became a staple of the second line at center. Like, these are two guys that are a piece of this part of this core. 2 more high-profile draft picks from Steve Yzerman who have made the jump to the NHL and were impactful in their first full season. Like, they got here and they were impactful. These are guys that, in my opinion, are pieces you build around. These are guys that I want to have. I can already say I want to have them here long-term. The only caveat as to why they're not part of Simon or Seider and Raymond's tier yet is because like they haven't reached that like near elite or elite status that those two have. So if there are like some niche situations, like 99% of trades or whatnot, I'd be like, of course not. I would not move on from these players. But there's like that 1%, right, where it's like, okay, maybe if it's like the right difference maker, like the Dylan Larkin status. It's that conversation over again. And I think those two players have graduated to that status. These are guys you build around, and it would have to be the most perfect of a trade opportunity for me to be willing to part with them, because 99% of the time I'm saying no.
Yeah, I think the difference is, and you kind of mentioned it there, is like these are guys that you believe will turn into those, borderline elite or elite caliber players, right? In terms of what they mean to the organization, maybe not in terms of like point production across the NHL or anything like that, but like these are guys that you hope and that you believe will take those steps forward and be in that top tier at some point. But, production wise, they're not yet, but they're still really young and just have limited, NHL sample size. So like, to me, this is probably another notch below Larkin, just because, again, of like, I need you to, the reason that Raymond and Seider are at the top is because they're young and they've proven that they're like on the ice that they can be that like caliber of player. And while I do believe that, Edvinsson and Kasper can be that and will be that, I think that it is fair to be like, okay, well, Larkin is ultimately still in his 20s and has proven he can be a point-a-game player. These guys, while really young, we have high expectations for, haven't produced at the level that I don't know, like justifies that placement or whatever. So I agree with you. I'm just like super splitting hairs and just being like overly.
That's what this
critical.
Conversation's about. This is a splitting hairs conversation,
right?
And it's
like
ultimately
super overly analytical. But I think, I agree with your sentiment of like I would not just trade those two guys unless the deal and the return you're getting would immediately improve your team and improve it long term, because like that's obviously the whole point of having those guys.
And there's very few offers in the NHL that do that. That's why they're like this thing is like all 5 of those guys that we've referenced, right? Seider, Raymond, Larkin, Edvinsson, Kasper, they are all part of a core you are building around. Like you said, we are splitting hairs trying to categorize them even further than that. It's an arbitrary conversation, and it's the off season, so it's a perfect time to have an arbitrary conversation like this. So again, those were 5 players that you're building around, that you want to be here as part of your Stanley Cup. It's just that Seider and Raymond have long-term deals. They're 23, like you said. They've already have a track record of being like proving that they're the guys for this team. And Larkin does too, to an extent. It's just with him, the only difference is age, right? It's like he's 5 years older than those 2 guys. And you wonder how much longer is he in his prime? Do you need to capitalize on, his value now? But again, that again is a niche conversation, and there's very few situations where I would be willing to say, yes, okay, let's make this move. All 5 of these guys you're building around. There's a 6th guy here, too, that I think I think we had an interesting conversation regarding him last year. It's Alex DeBrincat. Bounce back year for him. After 2 years of scoring, 27 consecutive goals, he got back to near 40, 39 goals. Had a couple opportunities in the final game of the season to get the 40. He did not, but still a fantastic season from Alex DeBrincat. He was second on the team in points with 70. Again, 39 goals, 31 assists. Great year for Alex DeBrincat. And there's a conversation to be had, is like when you're talking about guys you're building around, is he one of those guys?
So I actually want to direct everyone to when we had Prashant on, because I think his insight surrounding the Wings timeline and DeBrincat was the most fascinating of, involving that conversation that we've had recently. And he had mentioned that he truly thinks that the current window of the Detroit Red Wings is while Cat and Larkin are both under contract. And I think that is a fantastic point, because he was one of the most productive players on the team this past season. Is still pretty young. You gave him a contract extension. The belief certainly is that he is somebody that is a part of this current core. The question is, after his contract is done, is he the type of player that you re-sign and you go, you know what, we need this production long term, and we want him to still be on the team as Raymond and Seider get into their late 20s? Or is he somebody that when his contract runs out, the Wings are gonna retool, rebuild, whatever you want to call it, and maybe get rid of the guys that are like around that 30-year-old kind of benchmark? So I think his perspective on it was Prashant's, was really great. And I think that for me, like I think that Cat is pretty objectively a part of the current core. The question lies in, after his current deal is up, where does that change where you view him as?
Yeah, and that's the thing, too, because obviously he's a fantastic goal-scoring winger, great on the power play, and he gives you effort on both sides of the puck. Again, we always have this conversation with DeBrincat. He shows effort. Doesn't mean he's necessarily good at the defensive side, but he does try. And I like that about Cat. He's been better. It has gotten better. But you're right. Yeah. As of right now, he is part of the team that you're building around. He is one of the focal points. He's obviously not in the same tier as like the youth that you've drafted, but he's right there with Larkin, right? They're guys that are, you say, a little bit older, right? They're younger than me. They're in their 20s, but like they're not as young as the really young guys. Yeah. 29 years old. But you're still building around DeBrincat. Like that's why you traded for him. You traded for him to help take this team to the next level. So I agree. I agree with your sentiment. I agree with Prashant's sentiment. Like, yeah, he is part of this core right now. In 2 years, when his contract expires, what do you do then? Because he'll be 29 years old. I mean, I think right now there's a good case for keeping him just because of the fact of the style of player he is. That tends to age really well. Like, he's a goal scorer. Goal scorers don't forget to score goals. It's usually those guys who rely a lot on agility and speed, or have like a really physical game. DeBrincat plays bigger than he is. He's not afraid to get in the corners. But those are the guys who usually the drop-off happens a little bit more precipitously. But with DeBrincat, it's like, I'm confident if you stick him in the left circle at 35 years old, he's still going to be scoring goals. Think David Perron, for instance. Sure. David Perron, obviously a bigger body, a better puck protector, but like goal scorers keep scoring goals. So, I mean, I wouldn't be against keeping DeBrincat at the end of his contract, but that's a conversation for 2 years down the road. As of right now, yes, Scotty, he is part of this team's core. Scotty, let's take a quick break. And when we return, we'll talk about everyone else, just kind of wrap up, be like, is there anybody else that we're missing that we feel is part of this core? Stay tuned to segment 3 of Lockdown Red Wings. Segment 3, Lockdown Red Wings podcast. All right, so we've talked about everybody that we think are no-brainers as part of this team that you are building around. We split them into arbitrary rankings within the core, right, between the absolute untouchables, it would need to be perfect, and, guys that maybe in a couple years they won't be here, but right now they're here. Patrick Kane, I think you could kind of throw in this conversation too. Now, Patrick Kane is a pending UFA, and he was a pending UFA last year. But when he is on the team, and we all assume that he is going to re-sign. Doesn't mean he will. Last year I thought he was going to leave, and he ended up staying. This year I think he's going to stay, so who knows? He might end up leaving. But do you consider Patrick Kane on a year-by-year basis as part of this team's core?
I think that every year that Patrick Kane is on this roster, he was a part of the core. I do not think that obviously long-term that he is. I do not think that, the team is building around him, going forward. That's obviously not the case as he, approaches his late 30s. But I do think that every year that he is on the roster, he is someone that the team is actively building around. That doesn't mean that they're making long-term decisions based on, fitting with Patrick Kane and, does this person going to play well with Patrick Kane? No, those are more similar to the previous guys we've talked about, right? To the young players, to Larkin, Cat, etc. That is how, when they sign players, they're wondering how they fit with those guys. They're not wondering how they fit with Kane. They'll just figure it out. But in terms of on more of like a coaching level perspective rather than a front office, maybe he is a part of the core. I think every year that he is on the team. Sure.
Yeah, I think you added a really nice nuance to that. We split another hair there, Scotty, where it's like, yes, every year he is here. He is part of that core, that nucleus in the locker room. But you're not building for the future around him. So in that respect, no, he is not. Like, he's not with Kasper. Right. He's not with Larkin. Like, you're not building around Patrick Kane. But every year that he is here, he is a focal point of the team, and you do try to suit Patrick Kane's needs to work with him because of who he is. So it's like, yes and no. Like, yes on a year-to-year basis, but no, not long-term. It depends on how you're viewing it. So, yes, we just split yet another hair in this conversation. Again, it's an off-season arbitrary conversation. You guys can make all your own decisions. I'd love to hear what you guys think in the comments as well. So if you feel free to go ahead and give us your thoughts in the comments. I mean, I say that. You will anyways. Who am I kidding? It's YouTube comment section. But, Scotty, anyone else in this conversation that you want to bring up? I mean, there are names we could talk about, but I don't know. I don't feel like there's anyone else off the top of my head that is right now.
Yeah, at the NHL level, I agree with you. I think the fascinating conversation is there anybody currently not in the NHL that you are already kind of looking at and going like, that guy should be a part of the core long term? I think obviously the big one is going to be Danielson. That's going to be probably the first player that everybody points to. MBN, like there's a lot of guys that had really solid seasons down there and that are ranked pretty highly that I think we're all hoping are a part of the core going forward. But I think, to me, the most interesting conversation, because of what we've talked about over the last couple of weeks, is goaltending. Are either of the goaltenders players that you are already willing to kind of say, you know what, this guy is a part of what the Wings are trying to do long term? Or are all of them too young and you're almost talking about a second wave of a core when talking about those guys that are in the system? Because that's absolutely a thing across sports too, right? Is you have your current core and then you have your, okay, like when that core ages out type of thing, you have your next generation as well.
Yeah, I think with Kosa, like you put a category of like you hope becomes part of the core. You can say that with like a lot of prospects, Danielson, ASP. You like those are guys like, okay, you've drafted, they're in your system, they're highly touted. You want to be part of the core. You want them to be guys that you're either are part of the build around or you're building around, as in like they come up and they're helping you flesh out, right? Your outer core. We keep saying that word. It's driving me nuts at this point too. But like, you get what I'm saying. Like, those are guys, yes, they're part of the conversation. They're not there yet. They're not part of this conversation like now, but the goal is that they will be. And so they're absolutely worth bringing up because that's why you draft these guys. There's two reasons you draft players. One, so they help your team in the future. And two, so you can trade them to get players to help your team now. And I mean, we'll see which direction you go with some of these prospects because I think we're both at an area where like I'm in, let's get this team better now. I don't feel like waiting another 2-3 years for all these prospects to be here. Not trade all of them. You're not going to rip the cupboards dry. But I think that there is a conversation, like you just said, to be had about these guys and their future roles within the organization because you want them to be part of your conversation in some capacity. I think Albert Johansson's an interesting one too because he is one of those guys who made the leap. He was a Red Wings draft pick who finally made the leap to the NHL. Inevitably played an everyday role, not to start the season, but after Lalonde got fired and McClellan came in, found his way into a second pairing role. Now, is this a guy you would consider part of your core? Is he part of the team that you're building around, or is he part of the team that is helping to build around? You know what I mean?
I do. Clearly. That was worded horribly, but I do.
Yeah, I'm not a writer.
I think to me, and this is not intended to be like disrespectful or slander, he is like an incredible complementary piece to the core.
Supplemental.
Right. I think that, you wouldn't have too much hesitation if a good offer, obviously you're not like trying to move him, but like if a good offer came across the desk, you wouldn't hesitate too much if you thought the value was right. And he is a young player that did well last year that you're hoping can be here long term, but he's never going to be that bona fide like top pair defenseman. And so I think that he is an exceptional complement to the core and one that you hope is here for a long time. But I think that there is a difference between those two things.
Yeah, I think the way you put it was better than the way I put it. He's a complementary piece. He is a guy who is young, under team control, played above his pay grade this season. Honestly, I do still think he is a third pair defenseman, but he got asked to play a tough role because he had good chemistry with Edvinsson. For a while, he played it pretty well. Again, just like Edvinsson, I felt like fatigue got to them eventually. But this is a player that I want to see here for a long time to be that supplemental piece to help the actual core. But I also would not hesitate if a good deal came across. And let's say Red Wings are trying to get JJ Peterka and they want an NHL-ready young player and they ask for Albert Johansson. I'd go, okay, here's Albert Johansson. Like, that's fine. But yes, I think complementary piece to the core is a good way of putting it. He's not part of the core, but he complements it.
For sure.
And I think you could say the same, too, with at least the intent was with guys like Andrew Kopp and JT Compher, right? These are guys that were signed to long-ish term deals, both 5-year deals when they were signed. They were supposed to help grow and complement the core. They're not part of the core, but they're meant to help grow and complement it. Now, Scotty, the conversation here is whether or not they've actually done so. Yeah, but, I mean, I think longish term deals, they're here for another at least 2 and 3 years, respectively. They're here. They're part of the conversation.
I agree. I absolutely agree. Sorry, I didn't mean to stop right when you took a drink there.
No, you're good. I think honestly, I think that's all there is really to that conversation with those two players. I mean, the same thing, Ben Sherratt's entering the final year of his deal, but he is, up until this point, again, he was meant to be a complementary piece to help the team grow while the youth got there. Not part of the core, but to help it. And again, there's a different conversation with that player as well as how much he has helped with that. But yeah, those guys, just because they had long-term deals with the Red Wings, they're there, but there's not much of a conversation to be had because no, they're not part of the core,
for sure.
Which is the point of the conversation. Scotty, any final thoughts?
We ball.
We do ball. We'll be back with a new episode tomorrow, so stay tuned for that. Same time, same place. It's your team every day.
Every day.